These are troubling times from the standpoint of the way in which, without check, it would seem, Musk and his henchmen are being allowed to dismantle U.S. government. Can you give me a thought on that, John?
It's an attack on democracy. Anything we thought that was negative about Donald Trump is magnified immeasurably. Let me just point out to you that it is unprecedented for a president in the Oval Office to allow someone to pontificate as we saw yesterday. There is no question that your entire conclusion about Elon Musk is correct. It is a threat not to our government, but to our democracy. And I want to be crystal clear about this. Yesterday in the White House, an AP reporter was not allowed to come into the press conference to pose questions, was expelled from the press room because the AP calls it the Gulf of Mexico. And Trump is saying, oh, no, it's the Gulf of America. This kind of action is beyond comprehension. And let me just be clear. Tulsi Gabbard being confirmed is ridiculous. And I'm going to hold this up. I hope you can see it. This is Kash Patel's book, Government Gangsters. When you read this book, as I have done, and you realize that this man may be the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, it's shocking. And Robert Kennedy Jr. just passed a major hurdle and may be confirmed as the Secretary of Health and Human Services. This is incomprehensible, and I want to make a confession on this program. I was wrong. I've spoken all over the Bay Area, and I suggested this could never happen because the Republicans would stand up. Tulsi Gabbard was confirmed by a vote of 52 to 48. Only one Republican, Mitch McConnell, deserted. This is, to me, a scandal. Let me just say a word about Ukraine.
Hold on a second before you get to Ukraine. I want to just round off the point you just made. Play me a minute of Sheldon Whitehouse on the floor.
Sheldon Whitehouse was brilliant. He
was great, talking about Tulsi Gabbard and that to which John is talking about right now, that which John is referring to.
Albert has the clip?
Yeah, here, go ahead. Go ahead, Albert.
Russian state TV has called Ms. Gabbard our friend Tulsi. The Russian newspaper, Komsomolskaya Pravda, published an op-ed, and it was titled, "The CIA and FBI are trembling. Why Trump protege Tulsi Gabbard will support Russia as head of national intelligence." So the Russians are telling us pretty plain and simple, she's with us. If you look at some of her behavior, particularly relevant to the DNI position, she has constantly opposed Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which is a key source of foreign intelligence for our national security, and which I guess I'd have to say in this location, presumably is useful at getting intelligence on Russia. She's not alone. Over at the FBI, Trump's nominee for FBI director, Kash Patel, we just found out, was paid $25,000 by a Russian filmmaker with Kremlin ties to participate in a documentary attacking the FBI, which is an adversary of Russia's, which spends a great deal of time and effort keeping an eye on Russia's adverse intelligence activity in the United States.
Okay, Albert, thank you. That just gives you a little bit of an overview. The White House is typically brilliant and was very good, and that was just an initial breakdown. There was more. Go ahead, John. I wanted you to say that.
I just want people to understand. I am not an alarmist. I am not a nut. I'm somebody who understands the Constitution and the way it works. And this is not the way America should be working. It's not the way the Constitution should be functioning. Look what the President of the United States is now doing. He's going to talk to Vladimir Putin to settle the Ukraine crisis. And if you listened to Pete Hegseth, who is the new Secretary of Defense, they're not going to give the Ukraine anything. Their goal is to eliminate this. I mean, I'm almost speechless, which is hard for me to admit. I find this to be such a national tragedy and such a national disgrace. And I'm not saying this because I'm a Democrat or a Republican or anything else. I'm an American, for God's sake. And I can see the handwriting on the wall. When you have a president of the United States who has no respect for the Constitution, who has no respect for our government, we've got a big problem here. And the American people will wake up. The only question in my mind is, will they wake up in time? And I hope that we, and I say we, collectively do.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know what in time is. I feel as though I don't mean to be an alarmist either, and I don't want to heap kind of depressive news necessarily on top of other news that will depress people. But I feel as though the time to wake up was probably prior to this election.
You're absolutely right, but I can only deal with where I am today.
Sure.
Let me tell you something. The Republican Party has lost all credibility. And if you think the Republicans took years to recover from the Depression and Herbert Hoover, when the judgment comes down, I can assure you the Republican Party will suffer. More than that, did you hear J.D. Vance saying that we should ignore the courts? Has he not read Marbury versus Madison? Doesn't he understand that the whole point of that decision in 1803 was to establish firmly and precisely that the courts were there to check an executive branch which went off the rails? Ladies and gentlemen, we are off the rails. There can be no doubt about it.
The comical part of the Vance and others' statements regarding the courts is that they've gone to, nobody elected these judges. Why should we pay any attention to them? I mean,
yeah, it's absolute rubbish. And the misquoting of history. I mean, I want to deal directly with these problems, and I know I'm followed by one of the top scholars in the country, and I'm sure he will affirm everything we are saying. One last point. The nomination of Robert F. Kennedy is going to be considered. And all I can tell you is the idea that an anti-vaxxer and a conspiracy theory embracer would become the Secretary of Health and Human Services for the United States of America scares the living bejeebers out of me, and it should scare everyone else as well.
It is a time, interestingly enough, John, maybe you can tell me how we got here or how you see this. It's a time during which we have a lot of conspiracy theorists from the fringes who are now occupying the mainstream of government.
Now, all you have to do is read Kash Patel's book. It's filled with conspiracy theories. Let me just share with you the back panel. It says a sinister cabal of corrupt law enforcement personnel, intelligence agencies, and military officials at the highest levels of government plotted to overturn a president. I mean, I can go on with this. I just want to give you that one line. That's the key to this book. This book tells it all. And this is the guy who will be, before the end of the week, evidently, the Attorney General of the United States of America. You know, I go back to my days with Richard Nixon. As bad as many of the things that Dick Nixon did were, this is nothing. And what Nixon did was nothing compared to what is happening now. And the real question is fear and intimidation. You're right about the networks. They will take this on so carefully. They're afraid of losing their licenses. I mean, you understand my frustration and my anger and my fury at the fact that there are still people that I talk to who defend what Donald Trump is doing. It's just astounding to me. Can you imagine if the Democrats had taken George Soros and given him a forum in the Oval Office? The Republicans would have been indignant. Can you imagine what the Republicans would have said if a Democrat ignored a court order? I mean, these are unprecedented times and something we all need to be aware of. And may I tell you, I only regret we have only a few minutes to do this. We should be doing it. I was thinking, you know, our former colleague at KGO, Jim Easton, passed away at the age of 89. And if Jim were alive, and he became a conservative at the end of his life, if Jim were alive, he'd be I think he'd be going crazy over all of this.
Well, this isn't conservatism. This is some kind of.
But when you listen to Mark Levin
autocracy.
Or you listen to Sean Hannity, these are not stupid people. These are not people who are not uneducated. And how they can support this. Where are the Republicans, for God's sake?
They're cowed. They're scared. They're cowed. You know that. And these media pundits, Hannity and the like, it's all money, power, whose voice is big. I don't really believe they have the best interest of the country.
They don't.
Heart. I mean, they're all playing
interested
for
in being reelected. That's what they're interested in.
Luis says, John, do you still have blind faith in the American people? We, in quotes, collectively put these clowns in power, and half the country thinks this is all great. You want to respond to Luis?
My answer is I do believe American institutions work. I think, and I'll make a date with you, Mark, that in 5 years, we'll do this again. And we will understand, and the American people will understand, the tragedy that is taking place in our country. Do we make mistakes as a people? The answer is yes. Do the bands and bonds that hold us together in terms of our democracy? Adlai Stevenson said in the Godkin Lectures at Harvard back in 1954 that America was not great because of its military power or its wealth. It was great because of its ideas, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. But those statements, those intrinsic parts of American life are what make America great. And you want America to be great? Well, clearly, we've got to get rid of these clowns that are now presuming to take over our government. And as for Elon Musk and the idea that there's full transparency, I've never heard such rubbish in my life.
Well, it's a joke, yeah.
By the way, you know that I have a full head of hair, right? Can you see that? I have a full head of hair. And maybe if I say it often enough, people will believe it.
Heather Kennedy says she's with. This is what I think. I've never told you that I have faith in the American people, and I've never told you I have faith in American institutions because I don't have faith in either. That's where John and I have always gone around the schoolyard on that stuff. But I have less than zero faith in the people, says Heather Kennedy. Yeah, I'm with you, Heather.
Wait a minute. Half the people didn't vote for this.
I know, but the people generally, as reflected in, and I don't even know that. The whole thing was on the level, to be honest. But and then there's Teacher Lori, who always has something supportive to say. How is this discussion helpful? I'm not hearing solutions.
There are no solutions.
Yeah,
there are no solutions until we hit the midterm elections. And
that reminds me, I used to go to my therapist. I went for 5 years in Berkeley, okay, schlepping over the Bay Bridge to, every guy. I lived in San Francisco. And I go to this guy, and finally, after 4 years of it, I did what Teacher Lori did, which is, I don't know why I'm coming here. Can you tell me what the reason is?
I don't need a therapist. I need the Mark Thompson program.
No, but let me I'm making a point.
I need forums where we can speak out.
Of course, exactly. Thank you. And so that's the point. And what was explained to me and how it applies here is that in talking through and realizing the predicament that you're in, you begin to formulate solutions or at least clarity about where you are. These conversations are not always about what is the solution to this in this moment. In the constellation of issues and challenges we have as a nation, in conversations with John Rothmann and others, there are potential solutions that can become apparent. And
there are elections, for heaven's sake.
There are elections for now. I don't even know to what extent the legitimacies of elections will be encroached upon. I have very little faith in this crew to leave anything unturned. Yeah.
Then democracy is lost and the country we love is gone.
Right.
So we have to do everything we can. By the way, somebody asked me, why aren't the Democrats leading the charge? Some of them, like Sheldon Whitehouse, are trying to do that. But I want to point out to you, if you don't have the votes, there's very little you can do. And I think the real judgment day will come for the Republicans, because ultimately the American people will wake up. The American people will see what is happening, and the Republicans will not be able to blame Donald Trump. They're voting for his cabinet nominees. They are approving the kinds of things that Donald Trump is doing. And in the end, if a political party ever needed to be hit and hit hard, it is the Republican Party.
CC Ryder says Democrats have got to stop relying on Republicans to do the right thing.
They do until they have the votes.
Democratic lawmakers must grow a pair and ask the hard questions, do the uncomfortable things, and step out of the comfort zone.
They have. If you listen to the hearings for Robert Kennedy, you listen to the hearings for Tulsi Gabbard, you listen to the hearings for Kash Patel, you listen to the questions that are being posed, they are eloquently stated, they are clearly defined, and the problem is they don't have the votes. It all boils down to being able to convince the American people, and I happen to believe something very sincerely, and that is that absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. And this president believes he has absolute power, and he will be exposed that way. There is an arrogance of power and a hubris that ultimately will cause the downfall of Donald Trump. And then the question will be, will those who have supported him be willing to admit their error? And Mark, I respectfully submit to you, it is very hard for people to admit they're wrong. Now, let me just be clear. I did a podcast the other day in which is titled, I Was Wrong, because I really believed, and I was wrong, that the Congress would not approve these people that are being put in high office. That's the thing.
And once again, I'm sorry to be, the cynical one, but I told you, I thought he'd get all of his picks through. Once Hegseth made it, I thought there will be no pushback. Now, he's got
You're right,
these,
and that's why I did my podcast saying I was wrong.
But I'm not, more to the point, I'm not just trying to take a victory lap. I'm trying to say that he's got these legislators completely cowed. They
Fearful.
are, they fear the brown shirts, if you want to call them that, those who were pardoned on J6. These are violent offenders. The Proud Boys are talking about, they're reconstituting and coming back stronger, and they know that they can really act with impunity. I want to get quickly before I lose you.
And I'm going to stick around for the next hour just to listen. So
okay,
I'll be listening. I want to hear what you guys do.
Thank you. But
and I hope everybody understands how important the Mark Thompson program is, and I hope you support it. Absolutely, 100%.
Oh, thank you, John. Yeah, well, I appreciate it. We're crowdfunded, and we like to stay on the air. So I hope our Patreon and PayPal links are under this video. Depressed Canadian says, and thank you for the $10 super chat, Trump is accelerating the decline of America's superpower status by gutting USAID, harming the FBI and DNI, and undermining NATO. What will the world look like in a post-American world? Yeah, and this is interesting. You talk about 5 years from now, and you talk about the bounce back of American institutions. Of course, I do not agree with you on that, but I love that you have faith in those institutions. But what about these other things that happen during that 5-year period? Pulling out of the WHO. Let me just list a couple of them. Pulling out of the WHO, pulling back from NATO. It appears that NATO alliance could be very much in trouble. Declaring I was going to say declaring a trade war anyway against our allies and our geographic neighbors. What does everything look like in 5 years in the world because of America's tack toward what Trump and Musk and Hegseth and others are taking us?
Anything that Trump does can and will be reversed. We have to have the proper leadership in this country, and I believe it will happen. And I believe that those documents of freedom, which I mentioned earlier, provide the guideposts to make it work. Let me just say one thing, Mark. I'm a Jew. I understand what it means when you tear down democracy. I understand what happens. And let me say a word about transgender people. Take away the term transgender and put in any other name you want, Jew, Catholic, doesn't matter. I understand what it means to have leadership. And you will recall all my years on KGO, I said, the most important thing is it matters who is president of the United States. And I think the American people will learn a lesson. I hope it isn't too late. I believe that everything can be restored to the way it should work. And I have great faith. I have to have faith, Mark. Otherwise, what are we doing here? Very frankly, what are we doing?
And here it is. John, do you still have blind faith in the American people? We addressed that already. Thank you, Luis. But I mean, I thought it was a good point.
I don't have blind faith in the American people, but I believe in the end, the American people try to do the right thing. I believe a majority of Americans voted for Donald Trump. They made a terrible error. They will see the error of their ways by the actions which Donald Trump is taking and by the people who he's putting into office.
Well, that's what was just noted, that they are serving up, and Wes is saying, a lot of MAGA videos on TikTok saying that MAGA people regret their vote, but I don't know if it's real or the TikTok algorithm showing it to me, Wes says. Thank you for the super chat. I think it's real, but again, that's that's not representative in polling of what people are really thinking. The MAGA people haven't all regretted their vote, I don't think.
But what you're seeing, and they won't all see it, but I believe a majority of the American people, we're only, remember, it's hard to believe, we're only 3 weeks into the Trump administration and 3 weeks and 2 days. I believe that these continued body blows will cause such shock. And all I can tell you is, if I were Donald Trump, you know what I'd be worried about? The Republican Party. Because if the Republican Party jumps ship, his power to do anything is gone. There's going to be another challenge, and that has to do with the courts. We have an interesting Supreme Court, and everybody says it's a conservative court. Let me again articulate the fact that some of those conservatives are going to jump ship on Donald Trump because they are more concerned about America than they are about Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a real danger.
Let me just
question.
Ask Rothmann about Gaza and the West Bank, says Phineas. So give me some thoughts on this craziness coming out of Donald Trump on Gaza.
The idea of the United States taking over Gaza is absolute nonsense. I first was in Gaza in 1968. We talked then, 1968, about the beautiful beaches and the fact that you could have a Riviera. The Israelis, when they withdrew from Gaza, withdrew all the Jewish settlements, all of the Jews who were in Gaza, and said to the Palestinian Authority, make this a vacation spot. Rebuild, we'll help you. And the Palestinians, frankly, including Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, did not do that. But it's pure rubbish. And Donald Trump continues to say it over and over again. And that applies, now you'll see it with Ukraine. Our allies are all completely befuddled by having a president of the United States who acts so irresponsibly. And so
it's also interesting that so much of the Middle East is it's organized around religion. It's organized around, these belief structures and traditions and all of these claims. And the reason I mention it in this context is this entire Middle East conflict can be seen as an effort for Christian supremacy. The idea somehow that you want to return to this promised land, this place where there will be the end times, and Jews and Muslims will be left behind, and Christians will rise to the kind of euphoric, wonderful place that will put them at one with their Savior. This is a real structured belief, and it is. It's not just a fringe. This is a robust part of American politics right now.
About 1/3 of the American people identify with that evangelical Christianity that you are referring to. Let me remind everyone very clearly that that is a great danger to American democracy. We are not a country in which religion is supposed to dominate. We are a country in which people can decide what they want and whether they want to believe or not believe. What Donald Trump is doing is creating, and if you see Franklin Graham, Billy Graham's son, hovering in the background on everything, it is, if
that's
Jerry Falwell were alive.
That's the reminder. I cut you off because I don't want to hear you say if Jerry Falwell were alive, he'd be rolling over in his grave.
No, he'd be thrilled. We're spending too much time together when you know my punchline.
I know your punchlines. John,
thank you. Just quickly, I know you have other things, and you've got
go ahead.
Johnson coming on, but I just want to say a word about J.D. Vance. Do you understand that J.D. Vance is a heartbeat away from the presidency? That J.D. Vance has just said that the executive power should be able to override the courts, that J.D. Vance is opposed to aid to Ukraine, and that he may well be the next president of the United States of America. Believe me, when Donald Trump is gone, the question will be who succeeds him and whether the Republican Party can reconstitute itself in a constructive, positive way. And
J.D. Vance will not be part of that primordial ooze. As you say, he's a very smart guy in Yale Law School. He knows better than to question the court structure of America.
Do you remember who one of the first people in our country who described Donald Trump as America's Hitler? It was J.D. Vance. And I think if Albert looks for it, you can play the clip because we've played it before.
I've told you not to ask for clips on this show. My God. Albert we don't have run a clip service. He doesn't have all these clips just waiting to go. So whatever.
That's why I'm giving him warning.
Call out. This isn't a jukebox, okay? My God, man. All right.
Everybody should know in the old days at KGO, we would bark out the things we wanted, absolutely. And we had such a wonderful staff there that we got pretty much what we wanted. And all I can say is because I have full faith in Albert.
I see. Well,
I know that he can do it.
All right. Well, the words of Vance and the words of Trump knock around and echo around, and will continue to be played.
But we did not mention.
Future episodes.
I'm sorry, we did not mention the fear that is now permeating the immigrant community in this country, the increased power of ICE,
Right.
and the abuse of power, and the fact that Guantanamo is going to be used to house immigrants. Now, that's not the first time that's happened, but we're talking about 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 people. And, well, all I can tell you is I raise all of these things because, as you pointed out in the opening, there is so much. It is hard to identify the things that really alarm us. And
Around the Political World with John Rothmann is his podcast. It's a daily offering. There's certainly a lot to talk about. Probably feel as though you could do it 3 times a day, John. So much going on.
I could come on with you every day and we'd have more fun than that.
I so enjoy our times, and thank you for being here today.
I'm going to stick around for your next hour.
Yes,
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.